everyone, and welcome to our 2020 State of Resource Management panel today. We have our three panelists on the line right now. So you will see Alicja, Ruszala, Donna Fitzgerald, and then we have Carol Rozwell on as well, and she will be joining us from the phone. So you won't see her, but she will be joining in today. One thing I do want to say, we do have quite a few attendees today, so it'd be awesome if you guys could share in the chat window where you're located, where you're from, maybe just a quick tidbit on, what kind of drove you to join in to the panel today. And I think we are ready to get started. What do you think, Donna?
I think it's great. Thanks, Sam. I really appreciate it. So we hope that this is the first of a series of videocasts on engaging work. So thank you all very much for coming. We really appreciate it. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Donna Fitzgerald. I'm the Chief Product Evangelist here at ProSymmetry. The reason I wanted to do this is COVID-19 has changed everybody. It's changed everything in our lives, and fundamentally, we believe it's accelerated trends that probably started a decade ago and weren't expected to be fully realized for probably another 10 years. And we've cut at least 5 years off that, if not more. Fundamentally, what we want to talk about here is what have we seen? How is the nature of work? We know everybody's from home. Is that sustainable? What's the impact on knowledge workers? So before I get any further into this, I would like to introduce our panelists. Sorry, Alicja, why don't you start out? Alicja, I found because she wrote a book on resource management. I want you all to know it's there.
Thank you so much, Donna, and I'm so excited to be part of this engaging work first panel. And I wanted to greet everyone in the audience as well. In terms of my experience, I've been in large-scale technical implementations since the 1990s. And in addition to it, I wrote the aforementioned book, The Heights of Resource Capacity Planning, Management, and Optimization. And I'm hoping to add value to this panel discussion from the angle of experience as well as the insights from my book. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And our other panelist, who unfortunately you can't see her bright, shining face, is someone I've known for a long time, Carol Rozwell. She's an analyst, ex-Gartner analyst, and an analyst with the Analyst Syndicate. Carol?
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah, and I'm smiling and I'm waving at you, even though I can't see you. And again, apologies, it was my errors on my end. So you'd kind of be surprised that I've been in information technology for so many years and I let a little WebEx slip today. But good to talk with you today.
So, couple of things.
Donna, can I interrupt you for one moment?
Panel
I apologize.
Yes.
I apologize. Carol, it was a little bit hard to hear you there. So, Greg, if you're able to optimize that, that would be fantastic.
I will work it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay.
All right. Sorry for the interruption, Donna.
Oh, no, because we want people to hear Carol. Absolutely. So a couple of things I'd like to start off with is really what are we seeing with the fact that we've got everybody remote right now? And that means there's one person, in theory, we're not counting spouse and children, sitting in front of, at most, a video camera like we are, and there's no physical teams. Traditionally, especially in the PPM space, and especially most of you on this call, we've had a supposition that teams were the way we got work done. So I'd like to kind of kick off a discussion that says, if we are all remote for the next year, or if people decide to permanently work from home, what's going to be the impact on teams? Alicja, you want to start off?
Sure. I think in the remote virtual environment, what's even more critical than in the past is the aspect of soft skills, soft aspects of the environment itself, soft aspect of the platforms that we use, and the whole resource capacity management structure. And the reason why I'm saying is that's so important is because there is not as much visibility as we are used to in the regular workplace. In a regular workplace, we had in-person meetings. There was body language involved. There was a lot of mentoring involved where people could just work offline with people that they trusted and be coached on the approach to project work and coach on even personal ambitions and career moves, etc. In the virtual world, that sort of disappeared, at least temporarily. People might not have a safe space as they were used to share their insights and ideas. Soft skills are definitely coming into play here, such as innovation and efficiency, and both of them are kind of similar to each other. Innovation would be selecting the best solutions at a given place and time. Innovation, efficiency would be selecting the most optimal paths. And if we think about balancing the home environment and work environment, those two soft skills are critical. And we've all have been improving at this over time. But if you don't have those soft skills, I'm sure your productivity or social capital will be decremented in comparison to what you used to be able to find the level of performance.
Point well taken. Carol?
Well, actually, it's a bit ironic that we're demonstrating one of the issues with remote work literally as I speak, but you can't see. And that's the fact that so often in our lives with technology, we've required to adapt. We, as humans, have been required to adapt to what the technology does and learn the ins and outs and blah blah. And so the shift, especially as we get more artificial intelligence in the workplace and machine learning, the technology will understand us and it will take care of problems like this. So it's not something that I, as the user, have to worry about, but rather the technology will adapt to either my own limitations or my system limitations or whatever. But I also want to make a quick comment about what Alicja just said, the fact that what we have to be very mindful of is that it's not technology only that causes issues with employees that can't work together in person. It's also the relationships that are very difficult to maintain when there is this technology distance. So, Donna?
I find this subject so fascinating because my innate preference is you need people in the same room, that people-to-people contact is the most important thing. And yet, I have worked remote for 13 years, and Carol and I worked together at Gartner. And I'd never known Carol before I virtually met her at Gartner. So I know it's possible to sustain relationships, to continue to collaborate. But what it does bring to the fore, and I'm going to echo Alicja right here, is the soft skills. Do we understand enough about what we're doing so we could take, and this is my supposition, so that's why we've got a panel here, that we can take the part of our brain that's normally focused on technical things, shrink that down, and take a whole nother part of our brain, almost our intuition, that starts to say, what's really going on in this conversation? Am I really hearing? I have weekly conversations with a collaborator in Melbourne, Australia. It's about 13,000 miles away. And yet I've learned over the time we've been working together to just almost know where her head's at before she says anything. And that's the kind of thing, if we want people to do that, Do we train them? Do we work at it? Any thoughts of just saying we need this isn't going to get us anywhere? So how do we start thinking about making it real?
Yeah, so actually, Donna,
go ahead and jump in.
On this, that's one of the soft skills I mentioned in my book is the mind reading. You have to be extra perceptive. Perception is the key. You have to be ahead of the agenda and know what the agenda is going to be, and that involves both agendas, the written agenda and also the hidden agenda. The hidden agenda in the virtual world is even sometimes more so important, and you need to be ahead of time, just like playing chess. You need to be many, many steps ahead of the game to play out your chess positions as effectively as you can. And another key aspect here is the political savviness. Is it different in the virtual world than it used to be in the regular world? How do we find political savviness? Political savviness had to do a lot with your alliances at work and going to lunches together and maybe having a cup of coffee here and there during your breaks. Now the political savviness is open for discussion. What does it really mean? And how do you navigate through the virtual work environment? But another aspect of the virtuality that we're dealing with is the soft side of the resource itself, the dedication, the motivation, the communication skills, the influencing, team building in the virtual world. There are so many different aspects of it that now have to be strengthened. And there are many ways of approaching that. I'm not going to recommend a lot of them, but I'm sure there could be special training developed, special assessment tools built out, and resource management in general is so much more important in this day and age. And how do we go about resource management? How do we evaluate skills from now on? Because as we mentioned, soft skills are so important. Shouldn't we enhance our repositories of skill set to include soft skills? And that brings us to the whole spectrum of other conversation topics, right? How do we go about building that soft skill repository and managing soft skills in the organization?
So I want everybody who's called in who knows that Greg's going to give a demo of what the product's been doing with skills. I did not set Alicia up to do that. I had no idea she was going to say it. The key thing that we'd like to convey here is how passionate any of us in this field are about skills. I personally was the semi-product manager on a resource management system back at Oracle 20 years ago. And that's when I first saw how tremendous a good skills system could be. Carol, you want to chime in here? Just because we can't see your face, I have no visual cues, Carol.
I know. And again, this is something that all managers, all colleagues need to be aware of. Virtual workspace is you may have people that you can't see or interact with, and you've got to remember to ask them questions like Donna just did. So anyway, I'd like to do a flip side of what Alicia just said, and Donna, you reinforced about a skill set. And I would like to remind people that your own awareness of what you do and how it impacts others is extremely important. And this is particularly important for managers. Now, why do I mention that? Well, there's a lovely article I read by Tasha Urrich in Harvard Business Review, and most of us think we're pretty savvy. You know, I know this is how I work, and people accept me, even if we may have little things like perhaps being abrupt or rude or whatever. And, you know, much like the fact that everybody is a good driver, right? I'm a better than average driver. And
yes.
Tasha found in her research is that while 95% of people think they are aware of how they impact others, really the number is closer to 10 to 15%. And she goes on in the article, I won't give you all the stats, but she goes on in the article to talk about the number of people that she's interviewed and how many of them say they work with a manager or work with a colleague that's totally unself-aware. And of course, that can not only create some toxicity in the workplace, whether you're physically there or not, but it also can disengage employees. And so I would suggest that in addition to thinking about skills of the team, we should think about our own skill in things like, how do we communicate? How sensitive are we to other people? Can we sense where their heads are at, as Alicia was saying, and continue to practice and get better at it?
So I want to ask both of you a question. So I've done a lot of training, some of it in the workplace, some of it outside of the workplace. And what we're really talking about is getting people to develop various forms of emotional intelligence. And what I've run into is the things I can train people on outside of the workforce, and they're open and they're excited. If I brought the same training into the workforce, I'm afraid, and people have told me, they don't feel safe. So is there a way we can handle the safety issue? If you look at a lot of what's going on in the Agile community, safety is a word that's tossed around all the time. So how do we create an environment where people feel safe to start learning these skills that have never been in a job description before? Anybody answer that? Sam, you can chime in. Anybody?
I think it's kind of tricky for the organization to train their workforce on soft skills, because one question that comes in mind is, do you actually train them with some security in place? In other words, would you give out the names of the employees that you're training them in particular soft skill aspect, or would you keep it more like as an ID, employee ID, right? To keep it a little bit more soft and not embarrass people for any reason, because people might feel intimidated by the fact that someone identified they have to train in some aspect of their soft skill and characteristic. So I would, for the first phase, I would recommend some autonomy. In other words, not identifying resources by name, but maybe look at the whole organization in subgroups of roles and skills needed for each role and the positions people are in, and build out some kind of layered training by organization type, by department type, by project type, and by resource role type within that project or initiative, and take it from there. And then each organization should really establish key set of the soft skills that they feel are priority at any given point in time. And those sets of soft skills will evolve over time. They're not going to be stagnant. So the tricky piece here is also that the training will have to continue to evolve. And as the priority of the soft skills will change, training will have to be adjusted as well.
Sounds good. Carol, we kind of lost you there. So you want to tell us what you were going to say?
Yep, I was going to make a simple suggestion and then a more difficult suggestion. Are you hearing me okay now?
Yep.
Okay, good. So the simple suggestion is, if you're a manager and you want to allow the team to know that you're working on your own soft skills, tell them. Just be open about, hey, I'm taking this class, I read this book, or whatever. And what we find is that when the manager takes the lead to admit that they're trying to improve themselves, then that opens the door for others to take similar action, and also to provide feedback. It can open up a great door for when the manager says, tell me how I'm doing, or manager asks, excuse me, how am I doing? Am I getting better at communicating? An employee should hopefully feel a little bit more open to telling them the truth, as opposed to, yeah, you're great. The other more difficult suggestion is around the team as a whole. And I have spoken with a number of people in organizations where the manager took the initiative to get the whole team trained on some particular capability. One of the ones that I'm familiar with is social styles, where there's 4 different social styles, and you have the team go through some exercise, and this can be led by a consultant. There's also tons of stuff online for free, and the idea is that the team gets a sense of what skills they have and what the differences in people's skills are, and that can help not only open a conversation to let the team think about how they can improve as a team, but it also helps by providing vocabulary that people can use. And so, for instance, I am not of the analytic bent when my social style was performed. One way that this might be used is, let's say I'm in a meeting and somebody is providing a lot of data and I'm getting lost. I could say, hey, you're really analytical. Is there a way that you can help me understand, what you're trying to say? So it provides that vocabulary for people to discuss what they're doing, what's working, not necessarily saying what's not working, but figure out ways to continue to improve as a group needing to work together.
I think that's a great suggestion. I wrote an article quite a while ago on social styles, taking people through how do you, if you're a project manager and somebody who works for you is an amiable, which means that they smile and they want to get along and they're not good at saying no, and you come up and you say, Fred, can you do this? Fred, I need this done. Fred will just say yes, and you'll come up in a week and Fred hasn't even touched it, and Fred actually felt no obligation to touch it because you should have known how overworked he is, as opposed to, hi Fred, how's the wife, how are the kids, how's things going, how much work do you have on your plate, you got a lot, let's talk about it, because this is urgent, so can I help you, Fred, work through some of this so we can prioritize it. A driver, and for those of you who don't know, social styles there are 4 styles: driver, amiable, analytical, and expressive. And it's just a language. So amiables are nice, they're kind. Analyticals, we all know analyticals, that's exactly what they are. Drivers are, I need it done now, we've got to go take that hill. And expressives are people who talk a lot and want to sell you the vision. That fair, Carol?
Hello, and maybe some of you have guessed what styles the 3 of us are.
Yeah, I'm an expressive. Though once somebody thought I was an amiable, and it was a very strange thing going, I'm an expressive who's a closet driver. So, yep. Anyway, the key about this is what Carol was really talking about that I want to emphasize is it's just a consciousness. You don't change. The person you're talking to doesn't need to change. You're just coming to a shared way of communicating. And I think that's critical, and that works whether we're in office or remote, though thinking about this possibly remote, never assume you know what their workload is, never assume that. I managed a large program. I had a project coordinator working for me. Her sole job, because I was overwhelmed, was to go check on the mental health of everybody. And she came into my office one day and she said, Tanya's got her sleeping bag under her desk and she's planning to work through the night. Okay, now I have physical evidence that I've got to get out there with the team and stop that level of overtime because I've communicated incorrectly, and that's not my intent. But if everybody's remote, how do you know Tanya's got the sleeping bag? throw that out to everybody. Carol, you want to take that?
Sure. Actually, I will give you another example of when the situation works. I had a project I was working with another colleague, and I am definitely more on the amiable side. Maybe I'm a closet expression, you never know. Anyway, the person I was working with was a definite analytic, and the good news was we both had enough awareness of our styles where when we were planning our stages of what we were going to accomplish and when, she came out and she told me that we're probably going to have 2 calls for one step forward. And the issue was that she needed to have the interaction to determine what needed to happen. But analytics typically are not very comfortable making a decision on the spot. And so we had the first call to outline our work, and the second call where she presented her thinking and her proposal after she had had time to go away and actually mull it over for a bit. So the key thing that I like about social styles is the fact that it says that every style has pluses and minuses, and there is no perfect style. Mm-hmm. And also, there's no perfect grouping of styles to make a team effective. And it helps us to understand. It helps us to understand how we can better interact and with each other. And as you were saying, Donna, the sensitivity to the nuances of each style. The more that we learn that as individuals and as managers, the more we're going to be able to alleviate these communication, let's call them glitches, because we were moving so fast trying to get our work done that we didn't notice that, like you said, maybe I'm dealing with a Fred, or in my case, it was a female, but somebody who needed the time to think and was not going to contribute immediately in general to any situation because they needed the thinking time. And it's really important to know, especially if you're evaluating somebody's performance. So now we're back to Alicia's soft skills.
Carol, what you said is so profound because it gets into the whole conversation that I wanted to make sure we touched on, which is the diversity of the team. I don't know, and Carol and I offline have discussed this before. There are styles that groups don't know how to work with, and especially if you are in any large project environment, you're handling resources, I think we have a tendency to assume that you have a DBA, you have a Java programmer, pardon me, and that they are interchangeable, plug-compatible widgets. Well, we know that's not true of any human being. But how do we really figure out what the baseline is for a group to gel? So if I was managing a large program, mission critical, and when we did the postmortem, before we started that year, we asked one of the project managers to leave the project. Basically, didn't fire him from the company, we fired him for the project. When we successfully knocked it out of the park last year because the team had gelled, there were about 60 people, one of the things that came up in the postmortem was, had we not asked that individual to leave, we would not have made the deadline. That surprised me because I had not known him previously to coming on the program. But how do we get teams to gel and yet still be very sensitive to styles, understand people's personalities and strengths and weaknesses? Alicia, I'll toss this one back to you.
Sure. I think that requires a lot of skill on the leadership of the team. And also on the resource manager part, who is assigning resources into the team. If we don't have someone who is good soft skills resource assigner, we might not have successful projects. And I know that everyone has to have experience situations where you have similar projects with project A having the same level of resource allocation and same level of a similar level of funding as project B, and somehow project A falls behind project B in terms of the quality of work and in terms of reaching the timeline. And that's where the soft aspects come into play. And this is what, Donna, you mentioned, the gelling of the team. If we don't have cooperation on the team, the right support of each other, the right morale throughout the life cycle of the project, we're not going to have the same results, even if the hard skills are better on team A than team B. There has to be right mix of soft and hard skills, and people social capital that's at play as well, which means the motivation to help each other out, to show the best solutions for each other, leading each other in the path of achievement. And that really prevents sinking of productivity, because especially when there are deadlines and you have deadlines for key milestones, you have deadlines for the actual delivery of the full product, you're going to have people acting different ways and certain life cycle steps of the project. When the deadlines come in, the pressure comes into the play as well, and people start behaving differently. So if you don't have strong base in soft skills, the team and the individuals might not be able to overcome that pressure factor and other aspects of their personality, which they may or may not be able to control well under the pressure points. So soft skills side of the team is so important.
So I have an email conversation going on with another friend of mine in Australia. Spent a lot of time in Australia when I was with Gartner. I know a lot of people over there. And we got talking about the fact that some people, like the one she's working with now, have never developed the business acumen to understand all of what's happening in a project or a program. And I wonder if, in the sense, using the term soft skills leads us to believe that it's just learn to do this better, learn to do that better, versus almost the term, going back to childhood, is socialization. Do people understand that you've got to listen? And when you listen, and this is standard advice, rather than thinking of how you're going to respond, going, what did I just hear? What does it mean? What are the implications? And that if we just taught listening skills, a lot of the behavior, and I don't know, behavior changes, I line that one out. The ability to team build, because let's focus on the positive here, might start to organically evolve. Carol, I'm going to let you tell me I'm crazy.
Well, I would if I thought you were, but I don't. Here's another paradox, though, in business, much like the self-awareness of one's impact on someone else. Pretty much everyone I've spoken with in business think they're really good listeners, and yet we find that the comprehension of what somebody has really meant to say can vary from what somebody heard. And I know there's some corny phrase about that one. So what I'm thinking is, again, another simple way to deal with the situation is after somebody, let's say, you know, on the project team, somebody's made a proposal, I think we ought to be doing this, that somebody ensure by testing. I think I heard you say that you want us to. Is that what you meant? So that thing is really, really important. The other thing I would throw in here, just to be maybe a bit provocative, is the pre-mortem. as opposed to the post-mortem on any effort. And so what I'm suggesting here is, the more we can spend time in the beginning identifying what might go wrong, what trouble somebody might be having because they are overworked, or simply what trouble someone might be having because, goodness, these days, because they're caring for a family member and they might have to, take trips to the hospital unexpectedly. The more that we can identify those issues up front, the more likely projects are to succeed.
I think those are great points, Carol. And the other thing, apologize, there's a frog in my throat. The other thing might be that listening skills, or listening and working through people with that, does not tend to trigger as much defensive behavior with the team as something that labels you. Because I know over all my years, I've had different people share with me that they really didn't like, even though I loved social styles, they really didn't like it because it labeled you. They didn't like Myers-Briggs because it labeled you. But if we talk about appreciative inquiry or some of the other active listening, those are skills that you develop. They're really easy to put in the workplace. They're also really easy to show that you've taken the course. So it's something to where that might actually be a bridge. So if somebody is not listening and they've taken the course, you can go, hint, hint, you might want to pull your textbook back out and read it. So interesting I think what we're talking about is, if we are remote, we've got to get better with working together as human beings. I also want to go back to the social capital that Alicia raised. For those of you who are not familiar with the term, it's a concept that says we need to fit into our society, and that society in the largest context, and that because we're human beings and because at some level we are hierarchical, and again, that goes back to our deepest genetic roots, you can get status, and you get status by working for your community, being there when people need you, and solving problems. And the more we start to emphasize social capital, the more, and here's where I'm headed, the more we stop emphasizing overt power. And I'm not sure that power plays well in a remote situation. Alicia, you want to take the first time on that?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with your insightful specification here. So social capital, it's about participation and values-led living and networking, and it's different in the virtual world than in the physical world that we were used to operating in. I definitely feel that social capital is an investment that companies should be making, because it will pay off in the long run, and it will avoid also some burnout. Without social capital strength, I think some people who are more of the overall team, some people who are more inclined to be displaying social capital aspects of it are going to be overworked over time, because they're going to be jumping in and filling in for those people who are not as dedicated, who don't feel that they are part of the common team and part of the common goals. So I think in terms of strengthening the social capital, the leads of the initiatives and deliverables have to constantly reinforce with the team what are the goals that we're trying to achieve, and not just the goals for the immediate at hand scope of work, but also the goals in terms of the organizational strategic goals and tactical goals, short-term and long-term. So there has to be a lot of reinforcement and monitoring of how the team behaves, how the individual behave, what kind of values they display over the duration of the engagement, and reward resources and teams for being a team player, helping each other out, and being strong in the social capital aspects.
Great. Carol?
Okay, had to come off mute. Anyway, let me touch on something that might be a little sensitive for some, and I'm sure there's some open disagreement. And that's an awareness that even though you want a team to be productive, and Alicia said something really important about helping each other out. You know, the fact that you're going to have different levels of production from, forgive the word, because I don't mean on an assembly line, but you're going to have different levels of participation, maybe it's a better word, for a project, depending on where people are in their careers. So I'll give you an example using myself. I've been around a long time, let's put it that way. I've been on a couple goat rodeos, at least a couple. And what I found in my career, I'm at a point where I don't feel like I have to earn prizes. Instead, I'm getting much more satisfaction based on where I am in my career on helping other people progress and develop. And so if you are looking at me on a pure numbers production kind of spreadsheet, you say, oh, Carol hasn't done a lot lately. Well, except that I worked with other people to get them to a point where they were much more able to be a contributing member of the team. So I hope I expressed that well, Donna. It's the recognition that some people are going to be hard driving, are looking for the gold stars, whereas others are at a point where they want to be more of a team player and help the team as a whole out. Yeah, that sounds good, doesn't it? Help the team out and not necessarily look for the kudos themselves.
Carol, I think that you've really hit an important nuance, because when we start talking about this, and especially now in a situation where it might be possible for someone to sort of withdraw and appear to be producing, again, that horrible word, what they need for expectations, but they're really falling off the cliff. And there are people who are natural mentors. I could think back to a gentleman I sat next to at Intel, who was responsible for all resource management. I think that's very appropriate for this. And what did he do? He, quote, maintained an Excel spreadsheet, and that was his job. And we got a new CIO who decided he was going to fire him. And our boss was the CFO, who I dotted line into, and he was just livid, because what the CFO knew was that Martin was the go-to person in IT. Everybody took everything to Martin. If you had a problem, he could tell you who to go to fix it. If you just were struggling with anything, Martin could figure out how to help you. And without the Martins, and I'm sure we could all list the names of the people who have been the Martins in our organization. And we look the whole thing on productivity, the whole thing, there's now a discussion, are we killing society with our results orientation? Primarily because are we damaging the Martins, who actually have tremendous social capital? Because they're what gets everything done by enabling the people doing the work to do that. So what haven't we touched on? What part of the ocean have we not boiled, ladies? Employee engagement?
Sure, I'll jump in on that It saddens me. I started some work into leadership and new leadership models. Gosh, I think it's probably about 8 years ago. And that got me to look up some of the numbers, and Gallup does a really good job of, tracking the engagement numbers on a worldwide basis as well as individual country basis. And what has saddened me about that is the fact that employee engagement is at just an abysmal rate. One of the numbers is 54% of employees are engaged. And the problem hasn't, or the situation has not improved over the 20-odd years they've been tracking the numbers. So, hey, we're making progress on this. And I think about some of the simple things that can be done. So I'll give you 2 things, because there's lots and lots and lots. We could go for another couple hours, which I'm sure people would be thrilled by. Sarcasm. Now, a to-do and a not to-do. So the first to-do is, I've been a remote employee since 1994, and I've had various managers. And what I've noticed over the years is the stronger understanding that managers need to really ask how their people are doing, and do so not from a prying perspective, but from a real interest. And so that's extremely important. And I'll give you a quick story on this. One of the ways to understand how people are doing is to get them participating and feeling like they're owning the team itself too. And so one of the techniques one of the managers I've worked with more recently used is he would start meetings, get someone to volunteer to do a quiz for the team meeting. And the person could pick the subject, whatever it is. When I did pick food, which is not a surprise to anyone that knows me, another person picked space exploration. And the point was that even though it was only about a 5 or 10 minute segment of the meeting, each person revealed something about themselves. The team was laughing because it was a quiz, and we all know about quizzes. And so people felt quite involved. And I would dare say, even though it was quote unquote a waste of time, the people who in the meeting were likely much more engaged than if they just started out with the business stuff. And then I thought I'll give you one don't do. And this is, I think, rather obvious, but I have a story to go along with it. And it is the issue of micromanagement. And it's particularly tempting with remote work and many managers who have not managed remote workers before to micromanage. What are you doing this minute? What are you doing this second? And the quick anecdote I have is, I was speaking with a colleague literally just this week, and the person related the story that his manager was grousing about the fact that his manager had a new manager, and the new manager was trying to micromanage him. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting, because the colleague that told me about that, he has to have 2 daily check-ins with his manager. So here's the micromanager complaining about being micromanaged. So that's the don't do.
I think those are great points, Carol. They really are. There's some interesting things, though. I found some research that talks about, management and what people require. And there's a statistic that said, we've heard that a lot of the work at home productivity stayed up, but there was a particular survey that asked people if they were feeling barriers to productivity through, in this case, feeling motivated to do their work. And there's been an issue on, over 50, under 50. And the over 50 crowd, which is baby boomers and I think it's Gen Y, they like work, as strange as that may sound to some people, and they're very focused and they just do it naturally. You get younger than 50, so the statistic is feeling motivated to do work, only 20% of people 50 or over are struggling, and 42% are struggling. Combination of my guess is younger children at home, lots of other things. But still, the generational approach, and we probably have more generations active in the workforce right now than we ever have before. The generation protocols of where the line is for micromanagement. One of the most consistent things I've read is that people get angry with their boss because they don't know what their boss expects them to do. That statement makes me crazy. If I don't know what my job is and I can manage myself, then yeah, there's something there. The boss is in my face. So where have we developed this dynamic where we're cueing potentially a manager to micromanage because the employee is so used to being micromanaged, they don't move a foot until someone tells them? Toss it out to either one of you.
Yeah, I would like to maybe take this on from the perspective of micromanagement, and I would like to make an assertion that if you have strong soft skills on the team, you are not going to have to micromanage the team. The micromanagement level is going to be much lower, at much lower level than it would have been otherwise. If you don't have dedicated people, self-driven with the vision and innovation and efficiency, you will have to micromanage them. So get a team with strength in soft skills.
Sounds good. Carol?
I agree with that. And I know we're not supposed to agree too much on a panel, but the prediction I'll make is that work from home, work from wherever, because it really is a from wherever. That's not going away anytime soon. And so we best continue to develop our skills as individuals and as managers to work in an environment with a lot of ambiguity.
I think that's well said, and it's the tolerance for ambiguity that we probably should be stressing more than anything. When we start talking about, the digital transformation and we step away from technology, what we're really talking about is the impact of technology. You mentioned AI, Carol. All of a sudden, I don't know how many of you have that little Amazon device that will talk back to you. I don't want to say it because she's sitting on my desk and she will talk back. All of a sudden, I don't need to write down my grocery list. I have something that will write my grocery list for me. We'll see self-driving cars. Now, not yet see flying cars. We'll see. That's been coming. We do have video phones. The key becomes everything's coming so quickly that we cannot know which is going to be the ultimate transformational instigator. So we have to move incrementally forward, saying we can't tell the future, so we'll always be in uncertainty. And I think potentially, and we have one more minute, so I'd love to hear that it's not so much the work from home, it's how do we start pulling together and feel solid enough as a team, a company, individuals, that we trust we can deal with anything that happens, that we have a high resilience factor. Alicia, you want to tell us that and then remind everybody about your book before we run out of time?
Sure, and I didn't include resilience as a soft skill in my book, but it's so important, absolutely, to overcome any obstacles in the deliveries of the projects and just in general in our daily functions in the organization. Resilience is the key. And I wanted to mention my book is out there on Amazon.com. Please take a look at it. You can find it by either typing in my name, Alicja Ruszala, or the title of the book, which is the Resource Capacity Planning, Management and Optimization. And that book will focus on the soft side of the resource capacity and from every angle, from the angle of resources, leadership, the the platform that we choose to use, some characteristics of reporting that have soft angle into it, how do we select the resource soft skills evaluators, and how do we establish a resource management center that will function well in the, I didn't use the virtual environment back then yet because I didn't know COVID was coming, but it definitely applies to the current virtual environment. So I invite you to take a look at my book. And thank you so much again for having me as part of the panel.
Alicia, it's still on Kindle Unlimited, isn't it? Your book?
Yes, in both ebook and also in paperback.
Ah, there it is. For those of you, Greg is so good. So there's the book. It's Kindle Unlimited. For those of you who have Kindle Unlimited, you just press the read for free. So, yes. Carol?
I'd just like to say thank you so much, Donna, for inviting me to this panel. And I very much appreciate it. And hopefully I left people with some interesting thoughts. They should feel free to follow up if they want to talk more.
Thank you very much, Carol. I want to thank everybody. Sam, did we have any questions that we want to try to get to in a?
Yeah. So we do have a few questions, and I thought this one was a great question because it will pair into what Greg is about to cover in his presentation of Tempest. So we spoke a lot about soft skills and how important those are. So for those who are on the call today and are familiar with Tempest, and are using Tempest, you know that we just launched a skills matrix where you can track a lot of these more hard skills, more of these learned skills that people may have. But where should people be tracking these soft skills? Many times this individual says that these qualities HR does not encourage managers to officially track them.
Right.
But where should people be recording those soft skills? So maybe that way, the manager's keeping things straight, but also if that manager leaves and they want to be able to transfer that knowledge in the future to another manager, where should people be, housing that information?
Now, one of the things that occurred to me, because I've always been nervous about behavioral competencies, one manager's view of a person based on their personality and the person's individual could destroy a career when there's nothing wrong. One of my superstar employees went to a telephone company who will remain nameless, and he got fired a year later because he had a boss who just hated him. He was my brightest shining star of the whole team. So there's two completely different reactions. So I think where can it be stored? Possibly in terms of you took soft skills, not soft skills, you took social styles. The tool has the capacity to say what training you've taken. So that could be an area where you don't get into, and then there is the whole issue of formally adopting a behavioral competency tool. And that's way too involved to get into on this discussion. If anybody wants to talk about it, just reach out to me. Carol, what's your thoughts?
I've not seen an effective way to track the skills, but that's not also an area of my research. But I certainly would agree that using an established tool that has backing, hopefully some research behind it, that's one way to capture information in, let's say, hopefully a relatively unbiased way.
Yep. Sam, anything else, or we'll start to pass it over to Greg?
Yeah, so we also had a question too of, you know, for on two sides of the coin here. So for the resource management teams or programs that that some people are now just getting to develop, when should they start bringing in those soft skill conversations when they are looking at what people to put on the projects and what work people should be doing? When do we kind of start that conversation? And then on the flip side of too, for already developed resource management teams, you know, how do they bring this idea to light? Where can they really fit that in? So let's go ahead with the being developed side of things, and then the already developed and functioning.
I'm going to just keep this real short, which is we've forgotten the skill of interviewing. I have never staffed a project team, even with employees, with contractors, with anybody, without interviewing them first. I would never dream of it, because I got to build my core team. And once I build my core team, then I have an idea and they have an idea who will work well with us. And then you start adding people that gel with the team. The right people on the team make everything work better. They make it work faster. And once you start the protocol of interviewing and working with the team and building this, as you go forward, eventually everybody knows everybody at that point. And then you can have the conversation that says, this is a fast, dynamic project, and Art, who's a great player, just doesn't move fast enough. This is going to be brilliant individual, fantastic, just not on this type of project. So we won't put Art there. So we start to respect differences. And now I'll shut up. Carol, you want to answer?
I'll go with what you said, Donna. You got to know what your questions are. And that's another factor of the diversity angle. The fact that if you've got a team that has to accomplish a lot very quickly, you'd best make sure they relate to each other, work well with each other. Whereas on other projects, you may have the leader to build the team gelling together as a team over more time. You got to know which project you got.
Exactly. Alicia?
I would just add that the key is build soft and hard skills at the same time, simultaneously. Upfront, specify what type of team you are looking for. Are you looking for energetic, vision-oriented, high-moving, agile team, or are you looking for support type of team, which is going to be more relaxed, more analytical, maybe more back-end research type of team that doesn't have high visibility potential upfront in the delivery, but might have, of course, high visibility in the outcome, but needs a little bit more laid-back environment to develop thoughts, develop research aspects of the project, as opposed to get those deliverables in place, move fast, and you will need different sets of skills for both types of teams and environments.
Yes.
Thank you. So I think in some, Carol, were you going to say something?
Nope.
Oh, sorry. We're 10 minutes past, and I want to thank everybody for attending. I hope we've covered some things that are of interest to you. I think the ending note that I'm left with is, if we want our people to do well, we need to know them, we need to respect them, and we need to stop calling them resources and start calling them people, which is the big change we need to make. So with that, as I said, this is what we hope is the first of a series of video casts that we'll do on various subjects around the whole field of resource management and how it plays through all the project portfolio, engineering, anything we do with it. So with that, I'll say thank you to everybody who has attended to this point and pass it over to Greg. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. And by the way, this was how everybody got to hear Carol right here. I was just sitting there holding. I got some good exercise.
Thank you, Greg.
That's as close as I could get on that. So we just really appreciate everybody attending today. You know, what we're going to do now is, I know there's quite a few clients that are on the phone. So some of this, you know, may be something you've already seen before, because obviously Samantha does a lot of these sessions with her team. You know, she runs all customer success, wants to make sure you're all successful and all that good stuff. So if any of this is duplicate, I won't feel bad if you drop off. That's all right. I know we have some new people that may not have seen this before. So, you know, so again, I'll kind of go through this with you a bit. Now, I think the interesting thing, you know, based on all that I heard today is that, you know, there are other things besides just saying, hey, I'm a project manager and I need a project manager on my project, or I need an analyst, or I need this. And I think, as we all know, right, we're all people, and I think many people. Oh, I'm going to turn my phone off. Sorry. So, Carol, I'm going to have to drop you off. Hold on. Okay, there we go. All right. So, you know, most of us are focusing on this stuff, right? We're planning, we're strategically planning our work. We've got a whole bunch of operational work. In fact, probably quite a few on this call. You know, you spend 60% or 80% of your time on operational stuff, and you're doing budgeting. But obviously, if there aren't people working on these projects and working on all these events, nothing, you know, obviously, you know, gets done. You know, you just got a big list of projects that never get completed. Now, one of the things we're starting to get into a little bit more, and Donna touched on it, is, you know, how do we build this framework, you know, beyond just the traditional roles or skills that we typically have been working with. And in many cases, even in some of the questions, a lot of it is based on HR, right? So HR's capturing stuff in their Workday or other systems, but many times it's literally just titles. You know, we're hired for a particular title, and maybe it's capturing training classes and things like that. But when we start looking at, and again, I know the HR departments are really looking at a lot of these other areas around, you know, organizational development, you know, how do they recruit the right people, you know, how do they give people a chance to move up the ladder, if you will, or decide, hey, you know, I've come into the company with this particular job, but really I'd like to do something else, or this other area is more exciting to me. So what I'll talk a little bit about is all of these big ideas are fantastic to start thinking about. And as I mentioned, many of us on this call, and many of you that are using Tempest or using other tools, you know, for many cases, you're focusing a lot on these business skills or business roles, right? And I'll demo some things to you, and I'll show you that. And again, nothing wrong with that. What we're saying is, can we go a little bit deeper to maybe start looking at things like, you know, more of, you know, not just are we a project manager, but what are some of our interpersonal, you know, examples of skill classifications? You know, what are some of the areas maybe we're a little bit better at? I think some of us know, you know, there are folks that are really good at taking notes. They're very detailed. You know, they're the ones you want to put on certain areas of a particular project. And then you've got others that really, as you know, as talked about today, are really better at communicating. And you know, they're not the best note takers. They may not have as much detail as you'd like to have, but it's important to have both, right, on the various types of work that we do. So, you know, how do we now start capturing not just this high level business, but start jumping into this interpersonal and personal skills, so that, you know, when we start looking at the business functions that or the roles people are taking on, how do we start not only measuring, you know, what's our competency in doing that? And I don't mean that in a negative way, like, hey, this person's incompetent or this person's really competent. It's more like I said, right? You know, I maybe hate taking notes, but, you know, I don't have a problem getting on a phone or talking to somebody and walking through a particular issue, if you will. So it's not just, hey, this is what role I've got, here's the capabilities, but then, you know, my not only ability, but my desire to do that. And then, you know, what is my background knowledge that supports that? So again, I think Donna or Carol or someone said on the call is, you know, I could say I'm really great at this one area, but then there'll be a whole lot of people around me that'll say, wow, he really is not that good at that. So not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but how do we now start bringing those things together so that when we start delivering on our projects, or when we're starting our products, or we're starting to look for particular people, we're looking at some of these other areas beyond just the traditional high level skills that we're looking at. And that's what I'm going to kind of go through a little bit with you now, is how even if you're not there and you're starting to look at how do we experiment with some of these other areas, how easy it will be at least to capture it. So again, all of these ideas are fantastic, but we all know we just have to do our work every day. We have to try and finish the projects. We have to assign resources. We have executives that are saying, hey, did you get this done? Did you get this done? We're not making a profit. Hey, you know, this person has left the company. They've moved on to another location. So there's a lot of these things that we just are dealing with every day. So how do we start capturing this stuff instead of just putting it off in the future, as many of us do in many cases? So what I'm going to talk about is that most folks are going to have some kind of a skills library. Now, again, in Tempest, it's really easy to manage. You're going to have named people. You're also going to have generic resources that you can assign to work before maybe you know who you're going to put on the work. Pretty traditional, pretty basic. The other thing that I would say is that many of you today, even if you're doing this at the named person or generic, you probably have some basic attributes that you've associated. Now, again, I've got some examples here. So, you know, I might say, for example, Abigail is in this department. Pretty simple, right? Most of you are doing attributes, if nothing else. You might even have a basic role. Abigail is an analyst, is an audit manager, is a consultant, is a developer. Pretty simple. Now, we can also start talking about maybe just some other attributes. You know, what team are they on? You know, what are the core activity roles? So again, I think this is sort of the traditional area. People have done attributes. What folks haven't necessarily done so much is taken it to the next level, which is what I'm going to talk about, which is really getting into a little bit more of some other skills. And you could call these skills over here, but I'm going to kind of show you some examples of what I'm talking about here and what was talked about during the session today. So in many cases, you think about attributes, right? So you think about these are attributes. I have a custom field called compliance. I have one called education. I have one called service skills. I have one called industry experience. Nothing that says you can't do that today with what we have available in Tempest Resource, right? And then you can say, for example, Abigail, you know, has security awareness training, anti-corruption certification training, OSHA training. What we're going to say is, how do we take it to the next level where you have the ability for either an employee themselves, so we have some clients that are doing this, or sometimes this is managed centrally, either within the PMO, or if it is captured in HR, we can pull that in from the HR system. But again, as some mentioned on this call, not necessarily everybody has all of this data in the HR system. And sometimes maybe you don't want to capture it all, but it would be nice for the PMO maybe to know for their team or for some of the folks in IT or their engineering group, some of these areas. So if I look at it, I'm going to show you some other field types. So for example, I could say yes or no, I've gone through the security awareness training. Yes or no, I've gone through the anti-corruption certification training. Yes or no, I've gone through, you know, so fairly straightforward. Yes or no, somebody's had this training. Some other areas, right? We start talking about education. You know, you can always do this yes or no. It's real simple, right? So it's kind of just another level of, hey, here's some things that when I'm searching for a resource, I might want to know that they've had their PMP certification. I might want to know they've gone through some resource management training or whatever. Another level of detail, which we're starting to see, is that it's not just yes or no have they had it, but also, sort of what level are they? So for example, I might be a beginner in certain service skills, consulting. I might not have done consulting before, but I was hired and I would like to do it. So if I'm looking for somebody that can do consulting internally, then I could say, well, I'm okay if somebody is a level 1, right? It's an intern. So, but it could be maybe on a more advanced pharma project or something like that. I've got to make sure that they, have this level 5 certification in consulting. So this allows you to not only just have some attributes, but in addition to saying yes or no, but starting to look at, maybe designating what level they are. And again, this isn't necessarily, as we know, saying, hey, they're not any good at this. It's just, hey, they can do it. They're new at it. And so, that might be fine on this particular project, or on some other projects or products. I need to make sure I have, somebody that's a PhD, really knows certain, molecular biology kind of things, or whatever it is, right? You can kind of start covering this. Now, another sort of, I'm going to just call it a skills type, or not even a skills type, but a particular attribute type, is where you might go in here and start, not, if you can't use this 1 through 5 sort of rating, maybe you just do something as simple as saying, hey, they have a basic knowledge of this. They have a demonstrating, they're proficient, they're expert at this area. So this is, again, taking it to just another level than just having a simple attribute in the system. You can also leverage where you might just have a low, medium, and high. So when you talk about how hard is this to do, well, one, you can make it very complex, right, and really get into some heavy detail, or you can get it really simple, yes or no, they've got this ability. Low, medium, and high, they have this ability. Take it to the next level. Low, basic, demonstrating, proficient on whatever that attribute is. Or take it to the next level where you're really saying, hey, it's 1 through 5. And again, some countries, I know there are certain skills they can track or they can leverage this. There are other countries that can't. So I think, we're working on giving it and taking it one more level down where you can leverage some other types. Now, again, obviously, these are all user defined. I've just got some example categories built into here just to show you that. Now, I'll take it one other step further. So when we think about now, I've got those skills set up, right? So that it's not hard to set those up. They're very, within Tempest anyways. As you know, you set up your attributes just by setting up your attribute custom field. So, here's where I talked about just having the basic custom fields, right? I can say whether or not somebody's a consultant or a contractor or staff full-time. Well, you can do the same kind of thing with the skills, but it's over here in a different area than attributes. And so this is where also you would do the same kind of thing. You could set up, say in this case, compliance. It's a Boolean. It's just yes or no. Can I do that, right? Or under this industry experience, it's a different type called category, right? Or, and this is where I got into that, you can create a range type of attribute, a Boolean attribute, a category, an advanced category. So these are all new, and they really benefit comes in when you start leveraging, say, build team, or and I'll go into this Zulu project here, and I'll go full screen, and let's go over to allocations. So I'll show you kind of two really cool places that this can be used. Is, let's say I'm using build team, right? And so I'm getting ready to, and bear with me that I've already got resources on this project, but assume I was going to look for resources to put on this project. And what I wanted to make sure is when I was looking for the resources, I wanted to be able to leverage, maybe the service skills category, right? And I'm just going to scroll over a little bit. And so let's just say performance management, program and risk management. So maybe we've set up, and I'm going to go heat map, right? So I'm looking for people that are available, but I also want to know what their level is for program and risk management or performance management, or what's their expertise in master planning. So, it could be that I'm simply searching for, and I'll show you this, right? I'm simply looking for maybe a role. Let's go look here. Let's say role. And what I want is I'm looking for a, program manager. But I want to know my program managers that, are a level 4 in performance management, right? They're not real good at program and risk management. And again, it's done this color coding here where, if you're a level 1, it's red, meaning just know they're not expert in that, if you will. So we can leverage these other skills now in addition to our standard attributes when you're looking for team members, that might have availability that you might want to assign to a particular project. And all of these skills and attributes are available when you're doing resource assignments here, or I'll show you another place. And again, what we're trying to do is it's easy to capture them, but then also how do you surface that so people can see that? Those are also available for many of you on the call that are doing resource requesting or using our resource request process. You can now look for and use these additional skills matrix as well. But even when we start getting into, say, bulk getting, a lot of our clients, for those that are new on this call, in many cases, they may have a whole list of resources that they're assigning to the projects. So it's just like, a spreadsheet, right? Many of you are using spreadsheets today, and you want to be able to do your resource planning, either by hours or by FTE or by FTE percentage. But it could be too, there's other data that you want to be able to see in here. So just like you normally would in an Excel spreadsheet, there may be other data that you want to add to this view, right? So again, whether it's the roles, whether it's the department, whether it's project level attributes, right? You can start including those into our views that we might want to see in here. So again, I'm just showing you that a lot of the data gets surfaced in various spots within Tempest here. And also all of that data is available, of course, within reporting. So I'm going to show you that real quick. With some additional reporting around skills matrix. So, this is where, again, once the data gets entered into the system, you're going to have the ability to say, okay, I want to look at my employees, and I'm just looking to see, who's had this degree, who's not, who's proficient in these areas here, right? Who's familiar with, demonstrating ability with smart cities. This is another area that you can leverage. For example, how do you improve? How do we know people are taking training, or maybe there is training we want them to be able to take? Or if we're looking at employee growth and trying to say, hey, we've got a whole ton of people that haven't been through this class or still seems to have a low proficiency in distributed infrastructure, right? Or smart cities or whatever, and we really want to improve that. So let's go take a look at our employees that are at that level, and let's say, hey, you might want to go ahead and take this class or go to this WebEx session that we're having here, right? So what I would say though is for the PMOs and those that are mainly on project teams in here, you could just start capturing some of this data even if HR doesn't have this. The other thing that we're seeing, which I would say is very exciting, and I think one of the reasons that this has been added to the tool, is that you can go to HR and say, hey, by the way, just so you know, we're using this technology here today. It's excellent for resource capacity planning, but it also has this great ability for now doing maybe some additional skills tracking that we might want to look at. Now, even some of the large companies that we're talking to that may be using a Workday or some other HR tool, a lot of those products really don't do a really good job around this skills management. I will tell you that. So I just, no, this may be something as a recommendation, or if you have some kind of portal where you can make suggestions, this may be one area that you can get additional value out of currently using Tempus, as well as maybe it's something they just don't even know is available from the HR side. And we, again, increasingly are talking to HR organizations or the HR group, in addition to obviously the IT group or the engineering, who we're traditionally have been talking to. And again, in some cases, we have employees that, they've got access where all they do is when they go in, they have access where they can maintain some of this data, right? You may not give them access to all this, but maybe it's, hey, I would like to be able to go and take that class or not take that class. So the last thing I'm going to show you, and this is only for a few that are left on the call that are new, is you have all your resources, you have all these projects or products. We've talked about the skills, and the reality is that's all fantastic and awesome, but you still have to get your work done, right? So when we look at it, you have all of these projects that are taking place and all these projects that you're working on, right? And again, for those that are already using Tempus, you're probably deep into the weeds of this anyway, so this will be pretty basic for you. But we have the ability to look at all of the products or projects that are taking place. We can look at our resources and where we're over and under allocated. And then you have the real benefit here of leveraging that to be able to say, all right, now how do I manage this? If I'm over allocated, then you got a couple of choices, right? I'm either going to have to move work out because I can't complete it in time. And then you might want to know, okay, what's the impact of that work moving out? So show me the before allocation. So my audit managers were really over allocated. After, they're not so bad, but I still have to deal with that. I'm going to go undo these changes from the earlier demo I did. Bear with me here. So the what if scenario planning that we've got gives you some real power around once you're capturing those attributes, once you're capturing those skills, once you're looking at where your people are and whether they're over allocated or under allocated, you can now start looking at, I've got so many people with so many skills and I've got so much work. Now what do I do? So you're going to still have over allocations. We know that. So then you're going to want to either start moving work out or doing things like say, well, what if, or where can we slot this project in, and let Tempus make recommendations. So the whole idea of, Tempus in general is how do we make your life easier, and how does the product make your life easier? By making suggestions. Either, hey, you're looking for resources to put on a project, let me make suggestions of people that are available that have all these various skill profiles. Or when we're looking at projects or products, how can we make suggestions to let you know where you can slot certain things in that would fit? Now, many of you on this call are going through this today. You've got a really good methodology and life cycle you go through where you're saying, okay, now I know all the projects we've got going on. I know my resources. We now need to cycle through and figure out the best way we're going to prioritize and slot that work in. Very critical and very important to be able to do that. Now, that's really all I wanted to sort of cover here from this perspective, just based on time. And so I'll just gonna go look and see if there's any questions in the box here. I don't think we'll probably have too many because again, it looks like most of these are existing users. Yep. So I just want to say thank you all for your time today. We really wanted to just go in and cover some of the skills matrix, skills framework capability of Tempus Resource, a little bit around the what if analysis. And we really appreciate you attending today. We again thank Donna and Carol and Alicia for attending the session. We hope you like this. Please make suggestions to Samantha if there's any others that you have available. If you'd like to have a call with Donna, obviously expert, been to Gartner for years, is with Tempest Resource Now or ProSymmetry. Have a fantastic week. Have a great weekend. Have a fantastic holidays. And we'll be here throughout the holidays working with you. Someone will be anyways. And just enjoy your day. Take care.